Okay, so welcome to the journey with the Ogham, dedicated to Elder, the tree of Elder, and to the Celtic Tree Alphabet letter, Ruis, or Rues. So it's pronounced Rues, which is a word that's derived from the word for red, which becomes really relevant when we start to dig into the themes of this tree. So a lot of text, and I like to ground all of this in text, records the Ruis as relating to redness of the face a lot. So if you think of things like anger, embarrassment, shame, that kind of thing. So we'll get more into that later. The elder is regarded as a gateway to the other world. Many of these connections, if we're looking at the chakra system, are related to the root chakra, which again is red. So connections there. The tree itself, or the bush, so depending on where you live, sometimes it comes up as like a little tree, and sometimes it's more like what we would describe as a bush. So we have them here in North America more in the bush form, and then in parts of Europe, it may appear more as a tree. And I believe in like BC area, it will come up as a tree. So in a more temperate climate. Yes, okay. Moderate, temperate. So the tree itself regenerates easily after damage. So if you over prune it, it's going to be okay. It's going to regrow. If it's damaged by weather or anything like that, it has a really regenerative quality, which ties into themes of rebirth, as we'll see later, and the life-giving qualities associated with the goddess and the feminine. So we are very much centered in crone territory here with elder. So Scandinavia, Denmark, the more the Norse and Germanic traditions, the elder mother is a genius loci, so what we would know as maybe a dryad, the spirit of a tree itself. So each tree has this really potent energy and the spirit within it, and even the Romani, I always say it wrong. The slang term is gypsy, but the Romani people were very superstitious about this tree and would pick through piles of wood to make sure that they weren't burning any elder, because you need permission. And in some cases, some traditions, it says you have to ask 3 times in order to get the permission from this tree to be burnt. The biggest faux pas that I could say with usage of the tree itself is to do with the wood. So the leaves, the berries, everything, lots of the flower, lots of potent magic. But when it comes to the wood, you want to be careful and really make sure that you're working with the elder mother, also known as Lady Elhorn. So in Denmark, she's the mother of the elves and lives in the roots, which is really kind of, I don't know, magical and special, I thought. The elder mother from this tradition stands in or is easily replaced or interconnected with the idea of the wicked witch, or the wicked stepmother in all of those sort of fairy stories. So it's kind of an interpretation of that energy. And that's because she is a crone figure, so she holds such a formidable kind of energy. As if you've worked with any sort of crone energy, you'll know. And there's a meme circulating right now about how talking about that, about how like love and light being associated with the feminine is really strange, because the divine feminine is kind of like obey or else, has that very extreme nature where there's these polarities. And we're finding this, we'll find this with the themes of the elder, that it's very much like joy and sorrow, life and death, big extremes in those energies. And a lot of the old crone goddesses are very like they'll be associated with birth, but they'll also be associated with war. So you see that kind of played out there. The Germanic goddess Holda, she brings unborn babies to their mothers and cares for sleeping babies. And it's said that she has a pool of like unborn children that she tends to. So she is, and when I was reading about this, I pictured an ovary, because that's sort of a space of all these unborn children, unborn souls, that is carried on through the mother's line. So I was carried in the womb of my grandmother, or the ovary, I guess you could say, of my grandmother, and then passed on through my mother, and so on. So I really relate it to that kind of tradition, the matrilineal tradition there. She's also known as Frau Odin, and Frau or Frau Woden, depending on where you are. So this makes her a feminine aspect of the wild hunt. So same concept, comes out and ushers people into, if you're familiar with the wild hunt, ushers people into the underworld. The other goddesses associated, so I tend to try and keep more Celtic Norse tradition, but Hecate is associated with the elder tree because she is a goddess of witches, and the elder is nothing if not a witch tree. And the Kira's not here, but help me, Kalich. So the Scottish crone goddess, keeper of the mysteries, midwife. She also prepares people for death. And I found this to be a really interesting, something opened up for me here when I was thinking about the crone being someone that makes you, her lessons teach you or prepare you for death. That these big themes, these themes of shame, embarrassment, anger, humiliation, all of the things that we're going to be looking at today are things that would torture someone on their deathbed, right? Regrets. All of those big things would be something that would be carried to your deathbed, and right before you die, like it kind of, you're kind of working through these things. Certainly if someone goes into a state of dementia or Alzheimer's, when they're fully in the other world, they would be exposed to any of these things. And that working with the crone prior to that time, her lessons prepare you for that, so that you're not blindsided at whatever amount of years old you are when you reach that point, by these lessons, that they are somehow sent to you regardless of whether you open them up when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. So I thought that was kind of a really interesting thought about why it's important to work with the crone and crone energy. So the elder mother tests and chastises. She contains within her the energy of initiation. And like I said, with the sort of wicked witch archetype, she is feared for her magical powers and her sacred knowledge. So I guess sort of in summary of that, elder is packed with healing medicine, but the spirit can be intimidating to work with. And I think that is such an interesting parallel to developing your spiritual practice, that the more you work to heal and the more that you work and develop your tools, the more difficult the territory. You're having to step into spaces that you're afraid of and acknowledge things that you don't want to acknowledge. So it's definitely, there's a lot here, you know. The elder also bestows magical abilities and can be an excellent teacher for elders in a community. So not only preparing you for transition from life to death, but also in teaching you how to be an elder for others. What are your responsibilities? What are your obligations? So if you are going to take on a guiding role, anybody that's going to take on a guiding role as a spiritual teacher would need to work with this energy in order to really stabilize that knowledge, ground that knowledge, give a foundation. And to really understand what it means to be an elder, which I think is really important going forward, because particularly in the Celtic tradition and the Northern traditions, there aren't a lot of elders available to us. We have to, we kind of really have to pick through and find people, because that tradition was lost. And so that now in our generation and future generations, we can start to redevelop this idea of the elder spiritually. Okay, I just want to see if there's more here. How's it going so far? Any questions? For those of you watching the recording, if you have any questions, feel free to message me. Okay. So elder is also regarded as the gateway to Anwen, the realm of the ancestors and the dead. So this is in the Celtic tradition. And so this ties into our ancestral work in the month of October. It also works in terms of the veil being thin. So as we're approaching, and I don't know if you felt it already, if you've been out in the woods, you may have felt it already, that the veil is very thin. So it's really easy to move in and out of that journeying space. And you may not even notice you're doing it. If you have a tendency, if you have trauma, or if you have a tendency to dissociate, usually dissociation is related to trauma, you may be dissociating a lot lately. And so part of the journey work is grabbing a hold of yourself as you're dissociating, and then allowing yourself to be conscious through that state instead of just disappearing to wherever you go. Because usually in a state of dissociation, you don't really know where you are. But the journeying tools in the trance-like state can help you to be more conscious in that way. And that kind of leads into elder as a tool of transitioning into that space. So there's a bunch of different lore about this. One of the things is that if you sleep under an elder tree, you can enter into the fairy realm. There are specific, like midsummer, if you sleep under the tree in midsummer, you are more likely to get into the fairy realm, but sometimes the belief was that you wouldn't come back. This is partially because it is believed, and there's some controversy about it, that the elder tree, just being near it, produces hallucinations. There's certainly ways of bringing that about, of using the plant to increase your chances of hallucinating, I guess you could say. So for instance, if you burn the wood on the fire, but remember, burning the wood requires a lot of permission. So burning that in the fire can produce visions or induce visions. Burning the leaves at this time of year, all the way through the month of October, and particularly Samhain, will be really beneficial to work through the energies that are present right now. Because keeping in mind that the crone is also a protective energy, and the elder is the feminine version of holly. I'm not sure if all of you or some of you were at the holly Ogham journey with the Ogham, but we really did a deep dive on that one, and I think several people ended up with holly plants. Elder is much the same. So if you plant elder in your garden or around your home, it provides you with protection. And so again, it's something that, while it induces visions, you can also use it to protect yourself. There are, I guess maybe I'm moving into ritual uses here if we were to organize it. So in rituals of closure, banishing, crone protection, clearing negativity, birth, marriage, anytime that is a threshold, or anytime you're working with the fairies, those are key times for working with elder. Elder flower water, charged by the full moon, you can use to anoint your eyes before journey. You can also use the sap or juices. So you place it on your eyes and then you go into journey. There's also, elder flower is supposed to be really good for the skin. So you can use it as a face cleanser, this elder water. And it will help in beauty spells. So one of the, the only way that I would suggest a beauty spell is for you to see your true beauty, not for the deception of others. Let me just say that. But for uncovering, and if you're working with mirrors, which, oops, if you're working with mirrors, which is something that you could be working with a lot in this season, with that idea of this world, the other world, the reflections of one and the other. So if you're looking to boost your confidence or see yourself in a new, refreshed way, doing the elder flower wash over your face and then staring into the mirror and doing whatever affirmations, or even if you're just looking at yourself, that will help to kind of uncover a beauty that you're not seeing that maybe other people see. And okay, so then there's also the option to drink with the elderflower. This goes for the elderflower and for the elderberry wine. And there's lots of recipes out there and tonics and things like that. So I don't believe that you have to explicitly say, hey, elder lady, you know, like you don't have to say something formal. If that's helpful for you, then I don't know why the thing that's formal is, hey, lady. That was a terrible example, but there are, you know, out there are spells, Lady Elhorn, grant me permission, da 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 da. I think that sometimes these transactions can be a lot simpler than that. It's like asking permission of anyone you're with. Is this okay with you? You know, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be like dramatic, but it can be if you want, and that's cool if that's your jam. But so you can drink the elderflower water or the elderberry wine to connect with fairies and to connect with the crone, the goddess. But as always, ask the trees for permission. So that is sort of, you know, for those of us who purchase products that have these things in them, we're hoping that the person who is creating them is asking these sorts of permissions. So when we have a more commercial product, it's pretty much a guarantee that permission was not asked from the plant. So that's something to keep in mind if you're using elder as a medicine, that because the spirit of it is so incredibly specific and potent, something that is more commercial, that is elder, may not have the same level of respect put into its crafting. But you can always ask it yourself. So let's say you buy elderflower tea, you know, you can ask the tea bag or the, you know, and do your own kind of blessing to kind of work through that sticky ambiguous space. So elder is also really excellent for working for dream work. And like I said, working through any sort of journey state. To balance the root chakra, to work with your ancestors, and to work with the fairies. I'm just gonna go through my notes to see if there are any questions? So it seems like this is a good time. This is a good time to, if you, I do this sometimes. I start sentences and I don't finish them. Okay, so if you are someone who journeys and you hear more of a dialogue, or you see colors, or you don't really have a visual experience, and you'll know because other people will describe their visual experiences and you'll be like, oh, I wish I saw that. This would be a really good time to work on that, to connect with elder, to work with the plant. And you can hold the leaves in your hand. You could have them on your altar. You could, however it feels that you are honoring them. You don't have to get high by them, is what I'm saying. You can use them in any way that feels right or appropriate. And they'll help you to delve into that visionary work. So that leads to visionary work, leads to another aspect, which is that elder is key for shadow work. And so because we are coming into the time of the crone, and if you were there for, I think it was Mabon that we did this, where you were asked what you were ready to release, and that to be very honest with yourself about what you are not yet ready to release and what the lessons were for you going forward. I think that was Mabon. Yep. Okay. If not, maybe, I don't think I made that one available online, but I will. So you might want to buy that one online and do it if you haven't done that one yet. But essentially you come to this space of, now is not necessarily the time, or the winter is not necessarily the time for new. It's when we work through things that are very, very stuck, things that are very deep. We're going into the underworld. We're looking deep into our reflection. So if we're doing that mirror work, we're not just looking at ourselves for 5 seconds. We're looking at ourselves for a longer period of time. And really, what is it like to look into your own eyes? You know, what is the experience of making eye contact with yourself? What do you learn about yourself? What is it that your experience being over here in this body, not looking back at yourself? What is the difference between those two experiences? So you're going to go really deep with that. And the same is true for any lessons that the crone is going to teach us. So when we take a look at what is ready to be released, that has been the work of your year. So maybe that was even an intention you set last October. And you may have to go back in your notebooks if you have them, or journals, or, you know, kind of search your memory for what work you were doing. Where were you last October? That's a great question, actually. So look into that. Where were you last October? What space were you in? What were you working on? And usually there's a correlation between what you're ready to release and what you were working on last October. What you're not yet ready to release could be something that's much deeper. So it could be that you work through this year and it's still not ready to go. That's always possible. But it's important that we acknowledge that we're not ready yet, that it's not there, whether we want it to be or not. So it could be, for instance, you're ready to release self-doubt. You're ready to step into a space of, I keep kicking my own camera. You're ready to step into a space of not holding yourself back because of doubts. But you're not yet ready to release shame, because shame is something deeply embedded in, you know, your upbringing, in your experience as a child, an adult, a young adult. All of those different experiences of shame are still, maybe you've worked through it a lot, but you're still just not there. Like, it's not ready to be cleansed away. It's more like a giant salt block, and you're like chipping away and getting chunks off, but there's still more to go. And that's okay. It may not be comfortable to sit with, but it's okay. So this is where Elder comes in and can help you face those shadows and face what is still sort of lingering in this underworld space. And yeah, so emotions that are hard to face and sit with are going to be relevant at this time. And actually, if we go back to Holly, that's when I believe we began to connect with our shadow selves. And again, the shadow self, so if you were in that workshop, look back at the shadow self and refer back to any notes you made or any observations you made, because that's going to be relevant again. And certainly we're going to go through a journaling exercise here, but there is a lot of reflecting back through Elder, taking stock. 6 of Cups energy for those who are into tarot. Okay, so what kind of uncomfortable emotions are we talking about here? We're talking about anger, shame, humiliation. guilt. The difference between guilt and shame is kind of an interesting reflection. Definitely read The Scarlet Letter. It's a good book for this time of year if you want to reflect on guilt and shame. There's a lot in there, a lot of wisdom in that book about those particular subjects. And also it takes place in New England, which is like the autumn place, I think, for everybody. It's like where we think of when we think of autumn. So what all of these emotions have in common is that they're really difficult to sit with. They're very active feelings. Anger more obviously so, but let's take a look at shame and guilt and humiliation, embarrassment, those sorts of things. So when you are embarrassed, there is an instinct to to hide, to shelter oneself, to remove oneself. There's action involved in that feeling. It's very, very difficult to sit and endure embarrassment. There's always this drive to get away from it, to physically get away from it, which is so interesting because none of these feelings are things you can literally walk away from. They are inside of you. So the body moving to get away has no real value unless you're doing it consciously, like what we do in body magic, where we're, shifting through those energies with movement, with intention. But to remove yourself from a room does not mean that you just removed yourself from what was embarrassing about what just happened. You're taking that with you. And it may actually even be worse to remove yourself and then have to sit by yourself and be like, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? And for those of us who have had really interesting lives and who have had non-ordinary lives, we may have a lot to sift through when it comes to embarrassment or humiliation or shame or guilt. A lot of mistakes are made, and in the moment, even if we don't feel it in the moment, later we will start to feel these sorts of emotions about it. Even anger, like if you think of someone being really passive aggressive to you, and you sort of in the moment you're kind of like, okay, and maybe you continue chatting, and then later you go, was I just verbally punched in the face? And that can make you really angry because there's this sort of like half-life to it. So these are deep feelings, and with a really complicated, tangled sort of expression. So how do I feel when I have to sit with being wrong or with behaving in a less than desirable way? What is it to sit with those feelings when they are not sitting? If you've been with me in any other class, I dislike repeating myself, but sometimes I think it's probably important. So anger is not a sitting emotion. Sadness is a sitting emotion. Sadness sits. Sadness doesn't want to do anything. Sadness and grief don't want to do anything, usually. So they're easier to sit with and process in some ways because they don't want to do anything. They're not, you're looking at more of a mental distraction with those kinds of feelings, where you'll try and like consume anything into your mind that's gonna block out the sadness and grief. Where anger wants to punch, it wants to run, it wants to just move the body. And so sitting with a feeling that intense is going to make you feel pretty overwhelmed. And so this is where really rooting yourself in a body practice can be really helpful, because then you can learn to take that fiery energy and send it out through your body. So it's not just like, ah, in your face, fully raising your heartbeat, making your fingers move and your toes move, learning how to be still through anger, or through that kind of excitement, can teach us a lot of things. Because we can start to view that emotion from the outside and unpack what it really is for us. Because, you know, you can read a book, I can tell you about these things, but your own individual experience is more important than anything I'm going to say or anything that anyone else is going to say, because you have your own unique set of experiences in life that have brought you to where you are. So Elder helps us also to reroot ourselves and find a path that is no longer repeating past mistakes. So again, this is coming into the realm of the first thing that I talked about that we did at Maven, where we identified what we are ready to release. So now you're ready to release that thing. Let's take a look at what you were ready to release, and let's look at what is the path forward now that that has been cleared. Something really cool happened. Something really cool always happens when I'm in the forest, but I was in an overgrown orchard and I could see a deer path that was still a bit overgrown from the summer. And I found myself saying, the path will be clear soon, and realizing that there are so many pathways right now that are blocked. And as the death season continues, and as we move through the fall into the winter, it opens up so many pathways. You have almost free reign of any kind of territory or forest because there isn't that underbrush. So there's so many different options rather than just the main path, which is always my favorite. That's why summer is maybe one of my least favorite seasons in the forest, because so many ways are blocked. And that's interesting coming into death season, to think of it as, you know, things are dying, but pathways you couldn't see before are also opening. And because of how that works. So if you start moving on the pathway, I'll continue with the metaphor of the forest. If you start walking those pathways and you start to understand how the main parts of the pathways connect, because that's what you'll learn, is that you'll go through an area and then you'll understand, oh, like this is close to this, and I thought it was far away, just because of the way the main path wanders. You start to develop a fuller map. So it's the same for your emotional landscape, that as you know, we come through this time and we've released certain things and we're coming into the death season, there are so many different pathways that open up to us that we can start to explore. So where do you want to go? Now that you have cleared away this past mistake or this past pattern, what is the future for? How do you fill that space? And Elder also reminds us that some of our greatest burdens are self-made, and so our greatest healing is also self-made or self-healed. Our greatest healing, we can heal ourselves better than anyone else can, is what I'm trying to say. We're going to take a break soon. So this is a time to look at our unsettled business with the past, but also to look at how much settled business there is. How many, you know, what pathways did you find in the last year that opened up to you that never existed before? What's there? What fears did you face? What hurdles have you overcome? It's really important to take a look at that, as well as focusing on what hasn't fully healed. Not that anything, I don't know if anything ever fully heals, but I think we get better at moving through it. Okay, so the elder is also, you can think of it if you've done the Celtic spiral chakra, and we talked about how the cauldrons of the Celtic spiral are balanced. The three cauldrons are balanced by joy and sorrow. And so the elder really relates to that joy and sorrow, really speaks to finding that balance, stabilizing the root, and deep devotion. So this is a great time to immerse yourself in your practice. One of the simplest practices is to create little offerings or altars. An altar can be literally just the base of a tree in a park that you go to all the time, and you just leave something there. And to sort of listen for where you need to go and what needs to be left and what that represents, and just allow that to kind of unfold for yourself. So creating these like different nature altars in my practice is more powerful than having a bunch of altars in your home, or having them formalized with, you know, devotional statues and things like that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be as simple as, I collected this piece of tree bark from one place, and now I'm hearing that it needs to go to this other place and be left in this specific spot. So creating those relationships around in your natural environment. What else? Okay, so elder is also going to be really excellent. So the primal masculine, that deep rooted, the holly energy is going to be really helpful in healing sexual trauma, but so is the elder energy. So any kind of difficulty in relation that has happened, any sort of violence that's been enacted on you, hurts your root chakra. It can create a disconnection from other people, a distrust of other people. Our foundation and what stabilizes us can be shaken. And so if we are looking to heal those parts, elder is going to help with that. I tend to approach those things from a primal masculine perspective first, so that we can develop the protection that we need. We can develop the strength that we need, the masculine, recreate the masculine figure that didn't protect us when we needed protection, before we come into the feminine and heal the womb space and that sort of thing. So I tend to do masculine first and then feminine. But the crone is a pretty formidable figure, and so you can definitely go crone if it's difficult to go masculine first. But oftentimes, especially if it's the feminine that's been violated by the masculine, there is a lot of healing that needs to happen between that feminine and her masculine self, because we will internalize violence toward ourselves, toward our masculine selves. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done there, but the crone is also, and the elder is also really helpful in that healing work. Another way that you can use and this is just a fun light one, now that I move from sexual trauma into blessing someone. So using the elder leaves as a blessing, you scatter the leaves to the four winds and then say their name, focus on their name or focus on them, and then scatter the leaves over someone when you're done. And that is a blessing. So that's something to top off the heaviness of everything that we just went through. So we're going to take a break. If you want to get a tea, if you want to get some water, and for you guys on camera, we'll do some questions and a little bit of discussion, and then we'll be back. All right, so when you are wandering around in the forest, the coniferous part of the forest is always going to relate back to the older, more primal energies. So the crone or the sage. So if you are in that neck of the woods, after you've discovered your elder tree, definitely check out those energies and see how they resonate for you and what that means to be within them. So sometimes what happens is that you'll enter into a part of the forest that makes you feel afraid. And if you are experiencing fear in the forest, it's important to reflect back on that and to think, what is it that I'm afraid of? Are there any images that are coming in for me? What is this general feeling? Where is it in my body? Because often what that means is that the energies or the spirits of the trees that are in that specific part of the forest have some sort of challenging message or lesson for you. And so that could be how you discover what your sort of crone lesson is for the winter, if you haven't discovered it already. I feel like I'm like hammering it in. It's like, what are you not ready to release? Here's like 10 different ways to find out. But it could be helpful to kind of figure that out. And there's certainly, I've had the lived experience of moving through the forest and then recognizing like, oh, I used to be very afraid and now I love going into that part of the forest. Now that part of the forest calls to me and I long to go there. Some places it could be that it feels eerily quiet, or some places it could be that you feel followed. There are parts of certain forests where there is more malevolent spirit present. Alira, if you're watching this, that's like her home turf. It's like a part of the forest that I don't always go through, and it's like her stomping ground. So everyone's different. It relates to everyone differently, but there can be like some trickster energy in certain parts. And if you're really uncomfortable with that ambiguity, or if you haven't really made peace with ambiguity, trickster energy is going to make you really uncomfortable. If you are not settled with the crone aspect, any part of the forest that represents the crone to you, for me, it's the pine forest. Any part of the forest that feels crone to you is going to feel upsetting, overwhelming. You might walk through it faster. You might not stop as much or feel through it as much. You may not want to touch the trees. And so just be mindful of that. And then when you're connecting with the elder tree before you go into journey, just noting, are you comfortable with this tree? Do you want to kind of avoid it? Does it give you that antsy feeling of, I was just embarrassed and I wanted to leave the room? Or is it something that you can kind of sink into and you can see yourself getting closer with? So those are things to note as we move forward. So we're going to transition into a journaling exercise. So have your journal ready. If you've got some incense, hopefully you have that burning, or just a comfortable cleansed environment. If you're watching the recording, this is an opportunity to kind of get that ready. If you're not, too bad. Kidding. You can get it ready. And we'll just get started in a minute here. We're going to delve into one of the themes that I haven't really touched on yet, which is sacrifice for the greater good. So this is something that actually the movie Sophie's Choice is kind of a really extreme version of this sort of crossroads dilemma of having to choose. How do you choose? How do you identify things that may be comfortable, things that may be working, and still say this needs to be released? And so what that could be is that there's something that's been working for you, something that has always been a tradition, or it's just like when you've been putting one foot in front of the other with this thing, and so you wouldn't even necessarily think to get rid of it because it's just something that you've always done. It could be that that thing is actually in the way of something else. So if we go back to the analogy of walking through the forest, if you always walk, so if it's a loop, which it always should be, in my view, a forest path should always be a loop, or several loops. It should always lead back to the beginning. I hate doubling back, but anyway, that's my own issue to work through. But if you take the path in the opposite direction, it may feel a little bit uncomfortable. In yoga, we would do that, or in our movement practice, we would do that by maybe leading with the opposite side, or when we cross our legs with the left foot in front and it feels like, or you interlace your fingers in a different way and your pinky's on the other side and you're like, oh, why is my pinky over here? Like, it feels weird, it feels off. But sometimes it's necessary to go off and kind of like, is it hurting anything to start with your right foot? No. But what is it to let go of starting with your right foot and step forward with your left? So these are the kinds of, like, it can be as simple as a sacrifice like that. I think that's what I want to highlight here, is that you're not necessarily looking for the meatiest, juiciest sacrifice. It could be something quite small. And so to allow that to sort of appear as whatever it is and go with it. We're really asking ourselves to not be judgmental at this time. Okay, so we're going to bring ourselves, eyes closed, into a space in nature. And this is an autumn space. So we can see the leaves and the trees around us. And you can smell that autumn smell. Maybe there's a crisper, cooler breeze than what the summer brought us. And before you, you see a stone altar. So it could just be a large stone, or it could look like a table, a platform, just allowing it to reveal itself to you at this time. And you'll begin to walk over to that stone. And the closer you come, the more you see that there is a symbol carved on this stone. Begin to memorize the features of this symbol. If you feel you can draw it with your eyes closed, begin to draw the symbol on your page. You may soften your gaze and come in and out if you feel that is available to you. Recording the symbol that is on this stone altar. Without trying to change or alter it, without thinking about what it means or where it's come from. Drawing the symbol now. And from beneath the stone, you hear a scream. The sound of a banshee, kalish. It rises up, fills your body. And once it leaves, you hear the word associated with this symbol. Write that now in your notebook. Recording this word and what it means. You put your hands out over top of it and feel yourself absorb its energy into your palms, and then hold it between the palms as you would any object, not allowing it to absorb into the skin, but sitting on the palms. Walk open to an open field or an open space in this autumn place, and set down this object, this symbol, on the ground. And from that space, a person will grow. Identify this person. Describe them with soft gaze in your notebook. Describe what you see before you. Allow this person to lead you now out of this open space toward a path in the forest. Follow them. Note if any animal guides are present. Notice where your mind wanders to. And begin to feel yourself surrounded by trees. This person will lead you to a great tree. This great tree may be large or small. It is great in its energy. And somewhere on this tree is the second symbol. Begin to see it take form. You may allow yourself to draw it once again in your notebook. And from beneath the tree, you hear that same familiar scream rising up, filling your body from the soles of your feet out the crown of the head. And when it leaves behind a word, a meaning for this symbol. And you take your hands and you hover them over this symbol once again, drawing it into your palms and holding it in your hands. Begin to turn your palms down to the ground and place the symbol into the earth. And see a great hole emerge with the ladder. And you allow the first person, the person who came from the first symbol, to climb down this ladder first, to light the way down into the darkness. And once you have reached the bottom, they illuminate this space. Notice what you see around you. And somewhere in this darkness, you see a third symbol. Begin to record that symbol as you observe it in your notebook. Drawing every line, every curve. Record the meaning of this word once the screaming stops, the screaming that comes from all around you, from every corner of this cave. The screaming rises up through your body, intense and surging. And once it dissipates, it leaves behind it a word to describe the symbol, a meaning. Hovering your hands above the symbol, absorbing it into your palms, holding it as if an object. Take it to the wall of the cave, placing your hands on the side. Close your eyes. And once you have opened them, you will see that you are back again, standing before the stone. On the stone is the first symbol at the center. From your right hand, you place the symbol of the forest. From your left, the symbol of the cave. So all three symbols sit on the rock before you. And you must decide now which to sacrifice, which to save. Record your answers in your book. Which to sacrifice, which to save. And the third will reveal its purpose when we have left this space. Thanking your guides. Begin to fully bring your consciousness back into the room, back into the space. Okay, so I'm just going to say for those viewing the recording that you have your symbol that represents what you're sacrificing. You have your symbol that represents the third symbol. Sorry, just coming back from that space. The third symbol is your way through. So it's going to be the thread that you follow. And as you learn through that symbol and as you learn through that word, it will help you with both the sacrifice and the, I can't remember the other word, sorry. But yes, so that's there for you. And I will be back on to wrap everything up after we have our discussion. So having reviewed your three symbols and what they mean, there was the symbol that you chose to sacrifice, but actually your sacrifice is the first symbol that you saw. So now having that as a frame of reference, you can take a look at what you wanted to save and then what is the thread and kind of rework your idea of what's going on here. So, and taking a look at, so if the first symbol wasn't what you sacrificed, why that might be. What was it about your choice? What is it about the first thing being what you want to sacrifice? Like, why would that be the sacrifice? So those are some sort of like questions to review when you're looking at that. And I'm just going to go mute again so that we can have more discussion. Oh my God, I was not recording that entire time. Now I'm recording. I have to repeat myself. I'm so sorry, you guys. Okay. Let me see if I can repeat myself. I can't believe I just did that. Okay. So I nailed it the first time. Okay. So the first, it's the person that is your sacrifice. So if that is yourself, I don't know if I can do this again. If it's yourself, that is and the word is going to be an indication for you. It is an aspect of yourself or a way of looking at yourself or a way of being that is, and again, it doesn't have to be wrong. It doesn't have to be that it's like a negative aspect of your personality, but it's just something that needs to be let go of so something new can come in. The same goes for someone that's external to you. The person that you saw, it doesn't mean that you have to fully burn down that relationship and never speak to them again, but it could mean that something needs to be released from that relationship in order for something new to happen. Or it could mean that you do need to, sort of rid your life of that person in order for someone new to come in. So it's all about sacrificing for something else to make space for something else. But sacrificing something that isn't necessarily broken or wrong, something that is comfortable, something that that you wouldn't normally think of to let go of. Probably for the most part, everyone's going to be kind of surprised at what they have to sacrifice. If it was someone that you didn't know, taking a look at their features, taking a look at the word that represents them, and that will give you some indication as to what it is maybe within yourself or a certain kind of pattern or type of person that you're always attracted to that needs to go. So maybe you have like a certain type in friends or a certain type in romantic relationships, and this person that you saw that was guiding you through this exercise, that person is helping guide you by being sacrificed ultimately. So yeah, just taking a look at that. And now I'm gonna actually pause it. All right, so for your journeying homework, if you could find a drum track on YouTube that works nicely for you, something that's in the realm of about 15-20 minutes, and either go to an elder tree or elder bush if you can find one locally and journey near that tree, or if you can visit one and then come home and journey, or you can do that without maybe just looking at a picture of the elder tree. You're going to journey back into that space, so into that place with the stone altar. Start there. And then you will take your sacrifice to that altar. Now knowing which one is the true sacrifice, you'll give it up there, and then you'll ask from the sacrifice to meet the elder mother or the Lady Elhorn. And hopefully you have some guides or what have you to meet her. Creating this new alliance for yourself, and then with her, spending time with her, whatever she wants to teach you at this time. If she wants to give you a tool, or if you can always ask for these things, a tool or a word or some wisdom that you can use throughout this time, and maybe some work for you to do, or a specific place for you to go to make an offering, or to further this sacrifice. So the sacrifice, if it doesn't quite take in vision, because usually these things, we like to think that they work in meditation, but they don't always. It can take time to fully make the sacrifice. So anything that might help you to do that. And then any guidance about the thread and what is being saved. So just whatever information you can gather about that, and really she'll take it from there, I would say. And if you want to, you have those pieces of the map where you've wandered into the forest and you've gone down into the cave, and all of that is accessible to you as well if you need to revisit any of those spaces. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining.